Call it fate, call it luck, call it karma, but I believe that everything happens for a reason. Ghostbusters Afterlife. Now, Ghostbusters Afterlife is directed by Jason Reitman, son of Ivan Reitman, who previously directed the original two Ghostbusters films, and basically, this film follows Egon's estranged family, who basically inherit Egon's old farmhouse, which has kind of fallen down. However, basically, because Egon's family didn't really know Egon, throughout the course of the movie, they start to uncover that Egon was, in fact, a Ghostbuster, and also, they start to uncover that Egon was experimenting with all these supernatural events which were taking place in this town called Somerville at the time of Egon's death. However, basically, later on in the film, Phoebe Spengler, who's Egon's granddaughter, who is essentially a mini Egon, starts realizing that these supernatural events are taking place again in quote-unquote present day in the film. And then basically, she teams up with her brother, Egon's grandson, as well as two other friends to try and stop these supernatural events before they get too out of hand. And at the same time though, everything connects itself and calls back to the original Ghostbusters in quite interesting ways later on in the film. And that's basically my interpretation of the plot for Ghostbusters Afterlife. And just before I get into my thoughts and feelings on the new Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters Afterlife, first of all, I'm going to talk about my thoughts and feelings on the Ghostbusters films we've had so far. For the original Ghostbusters, I like quite a lot. I mean, like many, I grew up watching the original two Ghostbusters films quite a lot. Honestly, I think the first film is so much fun and it's so funny and just such a great watch. Honestly, it's a really good film, and even though it's a bit of an odd film, it's so much fun to watch. And the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man is just so brilliant in that film. Honestly, I absolutely love the original Ghostbusters, and Ghostbusters 2, I actually like quite a lot as well. I mean, I've got to admit here, I watched Ghostbusters 2 so many times as a child. Honestly, I really enjoyed that film, and I've got a bit of personal attachment to it because I watched it so many times as a child, and so I do like Ghostbusters 2 more than most people probably, but still, I like Ghostbusters 2 quite a lot. However, then there's a female reboot of the Ghostbusters film which came out in 2016, and I've got to admit, that female reboot just wasn't for me, and not because it had women in it, no, I don't mind that. In fact, I actually quite like Ocean's 8, well, I quite like it until James Corden shows up, and that actually says a lot about that film in general. The fact that my one problem with Ocean's 8 is James Corden, but anyway, yes, I quite enjoy Ocean's 8, but the thing is though, with the female Ghostbusters film, it didn't really work for me because in the end, it just wasn't that funny, and it just wasn't that well made either, which is kind of surprising because it was directed by Paul Feig, who's actually a quite good director, but that film in general just didn't feel that well made. However, now we are on to Ghostbusters Afterlife, which is essentially Ghostbusters 3, and I've got to admit here, I think this film is wonderful, I think it's enjoyable, and I just think it's so good because in the end, it feels like a Ghostbusters film. It feels like a Ghostbusters film, and in the best way possible. Honestly, I watched this in last night, and I just had such a wonderful time watching the film, and I could not wipe the smile on my face in so many scenes of the film. Honestly, I was smiling in the cinema through most of the film yesterday. I really was, and it's such a joy to watch because, like I said before, it feels like a Ghostbusters film. Honestly, this film has an unbelievable amount of callbacks to the original Ghostbusters. There's an unbelievable amount of callbacks, but the thing is though, they all kind of work, and they make it feel like a Ghostbusters film. And in the end, I can see why those callbacks might infuriate people who potentially weren't the biggest fans of the original Ghostbusters, or, Ghostbusters 2 as well, but nevertheless, those callbacks worked for me. I've talked about it before, it's very nostalgic, this film, it's very nostalgic, and nostalgia in film can be done well, or can be done quite badly, and in fact, I watched films in the past where nostalgia just hasn't really worked for me in those films. But the thing is though, I'd kind of compare Ghostbusters Afterlife to Star Wars The Force Awakens, two films which are soft reboots of franchises which, with past films which people have liked, and then basically, like Star Wars The Force Awakens, Ghostbusters Afterlife is a reboot of a franchise. It's a soft reboot that calls a lot back to the first film in that franchise. Like Star Wars The Force Awakens, which calls a lot back to Star Wars Episode 4 A New Hope, Ghostbusters Afterlife calls a lot back to the original Ghostbusters, but not in a bad way. Honestly, it did kind of feel a bit like Star Wars Force Awakens in the sense that, Star Wars Force Awakens calls a lot back to Star Wars Episode 4, but it does it in a really good way, and the same thing happens here. Honestly, I was watching some of the callbacks in the film to the original Ghostbusters just with the biggest grin on my face, and not to give too much away here, but it has been publicised that they are in the film, so I'm going to say that. But basically, when the original Ghostbusters return, well, when the original remaining Ghostbusters return later on in the film, honestly, I just wanted to stand up and cheer in the cinema, like, yes! And just, it's such a great scene when they return, it really is. And even so, the way they bring them in is a bit iffy, I've got to admit. Even so, the way they bring them in is a bit iffy. Honestly, it's such a joy to watch Dan Aykroyd, Ernie Hudson, and Bill Murray back, and they all just steal the show in the best way possible. And they're so fun to watch, they really are. And also Annie Potts, who obviously played the assistant in the original two Ghostbusters films, she's back here, and she's also a joy to watch as well. And just honestly, the way the original cast return isn't the best, but just watching them return is the best. That's what I'm trying to say. It's so joyful to watch, like the film as a whole. Honestly, it really feels a bit like a coming-of-age movie. It feels a bit like Goonies in some sense, which is really good in my opinion. I really like Goonies, so it feels a bit like Goonies in some aspects, but at the same time, no, it also feels like a Ghostbusters film. That's what I like about it. So it feels like a Ghostbusters film, and in the best way possible. And another thing I really love about this film is the fact that it uses practical effects. Now, for many people nowadays, that wouldn't be a big issue, because, you know, so many blockbusters nowadays, and I'm not saying this is always a bad thing, but so many blockbusters nowadays always use CGI in their big action set pieces. But here, when they bring that demo dog back from the original Ghostbusters, they bring him back in this film, they use practical effects. And that had me literally going, yes, in the cinema, because honestly, I miss practical effects in films, and they brung it back here, and it calls back to the original Ghostbusters when they use the practical effects to the demo dogs in the original Ghostbusters. The same effects are used here, and it's just fantastic. Honestly, there's one sequence where a demo dog is chasing Paul Rudd's character with like a Walmart store, and it's a really good sequence because they use practical effects for the demo dog. You know, it's not CGI. Well, it might be CGI in some small parts, but at the same time, though, he looks so realistic in so many scenes, and I just love that. I love the fact that they use practical effects. I knew I was going to love that because I actually saw that in the trailer that they used practical effects in the film, so I knew even before I saw this film that I was going to love one aspect. Even if I didn't like the film, which I do by the way, but even if I didn't like the film, I knew just from the trailer that I was going to love one aspect of it, and that was the fact that they used practical effects like they did in the original two Ghostbusters films, and they do again here, and in the best way possible. Honestly, I love the fact that they use practical effects. I just love it, I love it, I love it. And also, going back to the whole thing that it feels like a Ghostbusters film. Not only to have the demo dog coming back, which is just so fantastic in my opinion, but also you have this great score which has so many callbacks to Emma Bernstein's score for the original Ghostbusters. And it's such a treat to listen to that soundtrack. And even so, that might not be a big thing for so many people watching this film. For me personally, as a fan of, you know, musical score for films, I always listen to a musical score for a film when I go and watch it. I'm always very intrigued to what a musical score is going to be like. Or should I say, to hear what a musical score is going to be like. To hear, you know, some of those Elmer Bernstein motives. To hear some of those Elmer Bernstein themes from the original Ghostbusters, you know, quoted here in the best way possible. It's just such a treat and just really made me smile, and again made the film feel like a Ghostbusters film, and it's such a joyful way. And at the same time, though, all the performances are great, all the newcomers are absolutely fantastic. You know, McKenna Grace as Phoebe Spengler, basically the granddaughter of Egon, who is basically a mini Egon, is so great. She really is. And also Podcast, her friend that she meets early on in the film, is also fantastic. He's a lot of fun to watch. And at the same time, though, you know, Finn Wolfhard is great as Egon's grandson, and he also meets a girl who's quite a lot of fun to watch as well. And at the same time, though, Carrie Coon as Egon's daughter is also a lot of fun to watch, and quite a lot of emotion with her character, which works for me, I've got to admit. And at the same time, though, Paul Rudd is fantastic in this film. Honestly, if Paul Rudd wasn't in the film, maybe I wouldn't find the film as funny as I do. But the fact is, though, Paul Rudd is in this film, and he is such a joy to watch. Honestly, he's so delightful in the film, and he's so funny. Paul Rudd made so much of the comedy work in the film, and just in the best way possible. At the same time, though, sticking on the comedy for a sec, I've seen a lot of sniffy reviews online of this film. So basically, like, you know, this film doesn't understand that the original Ghostbusters was a comedy, and this Ghostbusters film isn't a comedy. It's the most serious and emotional Ghostbusters film today. And even so, that is true. Yes, it is the most serious and emotional Ghostbusters film today. Yes, I agree with that. It does still have a lot of comedy in there. There's a lot of funny parts in there in this film, which works, whether it's Paul Rudd, whether it's, you know, whether it's Podcast, you know, Phoebe Spengler's friend, or whether it's all the different aspects, or whether it's the original Ghostbusters returning, and Bill Murray, who's stealing the show, whether, you know, Ernie Hudson is stealing the show, or Dan Aykroyd is stealing the show. You know, there's a lot of comedy in the film, which works. It isn't just the most serious and emotional Ghostbusters film today, it is still funny as well, which works for me. It does still have comedy in there, which works, and yes, it is serious and emotional, but at the same time, though, the comedy is in there, and most of it works. I do actually have got to admit there, most of it works, some of it does fall a bit flat, but most of the comedy works in the film. And yes, like I said before, it is the most serious and emotional Ghostbusters film today, but actually that works for me. You know, like the Ghostbusters themselves, the franchise has matured, it's evolved, and the franchise has become more serious and more emotional, and you know what? That's not a bad thing in my opinion. Because the thing is though, I think more than anything, this film is a bit of a tribute to Howard Ramis, who actually played Egon in the original two Ghostbusters films, but sadly died in 2014, so he couldn't appear in, the female reboot or in this film. And the thing is though, there's so many tributes to him in this film, and it's just absolutely fantastic, and that's what makes it emotional. You have the whole sense of Egon in this film, and you have the whole sense, Egon's a strange family who don't really think highly of him until, later on in the film, when they start to uncover more and more things about him, and then becomes more of a tribute to Howard Ramis, and just in the best way possible. I love the fact that this film pays tribute to Howard Ramis, and just in such a wonderful way. Honestly, it's a really, really wonderful film, and it's so joyful to watch, and you know what? It's a fantastic Ghostbusters sequel. I even like it better than Ghostbusters 2, and I quite enjoy that film. I understand why a lot of people don't, but personally, I think Ghostbusters 2 is a really enjoyable film. But saying that though, I prefer Ghostbusters Afterlife. I prefer Ghostbusters Afterlife over Ghostbusters 2. And I think it's wonderful. I think it's really enjoyable. There's a great energy with it as well. And like I said before, my Sigourney, overcome of age from like the 80s, and in such a wonderful way, and it feels like a Ghostbusters film. That's why it works. It's so entertaining. It's so much fun to watch. It's got a lot of comedy in there which works. And just seeing the original Ghostbusters back, as well as Annie Potts and a small cameo from Sigourney Weaver, again, that's not a spoiler. That's been heavily publicised as well. But to see this original cast back, it's just an absolute treat, and it's so wonderful, and it literally brings the biggest smile on your face, in my opinion. Honestly, I could not wipe the smile off my face when I was watching the film last night in the cinema. I think it's wonderful. I think it's joyful, and I think it's such a delightful film. I really do. And honestly, I think it's actually going to turn out to be one of my favourite films of 2021. Maybe not one of the best films of 2021, because in the end, it's not a brilliant film. It just has a bit ropey moments in terms of plot, and it does feel a tad bit disjointed in terms of direction, and it isn't always the best in the way the plot moves about sometimes, but nevertheless, even so it isn't one of the best movies of 2021 in my opinion, it might be one of my favourite. There's two different lists there, the best movies of 2021 and my favourite movies of 2021 are two different lists. But actually, I've just got to admit here, I think Ghostbusters Afterlife would fit into that list of my favourite movies of 2021 so far. Honestly, I really, really enjoyed this film, and I thought it was actually fantastic. And so, all in all, I'm going to say that Ghostbusters Afterlife, I'm going to say that it's an 8 out of 10. Honestly, it's a really great film, and it brought back those memories of me watching Ghostbusters as a child, and I really didn't expect this film to do that. So I used to watch the first two Ghostbusters films so many times as a child, but the thing is though, I stopped watching them for a long while. I actually did, and then I watched the female one, and I didn't like the female reboot, but nevertheless, I actually watched Ghostbusters again this Halloween in preparation for this film, so I'm reminding myself about the original Ghostbusters, because I actually forgot a lot about it, and actually watching Halloween got me really excited to see this film, and then watching Ghostbusters Afterlife not long after watching the original film again was just fantastic. It really was. And actually, I would say this film relies a lot on the original Ghostbusters film, but again, not in a bad way. I'm not saying that in a bad way. I've seen films before rely on nostalgia in quite a bad way, and it doesn't always work. However, in this film it does. Like in Star Wars Force Awakens, nostalgic elements work, the same thing happens here. And the thing is though, I've seen some people criticise the nostalgia elements in the film, but, Jason Reitman, the director of the film, has even said in interviews, I've heard him in interviews say stuff like, in the end, this film relies a lot on nostalgia. I'm not hiding that. He said that in interviews. And you can clearly tell, he's even said things like, this film is all about going into your grandfather's basement and seeing what's there. That's quite literally what they do in the film. And that just works for me so well. Honestly, that's the only way I think you could do a Ghostbusters sequel. And I think that's why this film works. Because, yes, it relies heavily on nostalgia. It's not hiding that, it does. But that's why it works as a Ghostbusters film. Because it has all those callbacks to the original Ghostbusters and just in such a delightful way. And one thing I almost forgot to mention, and man, I would never have forgiven myself if I forgot to mention this, was the small Stay Puft Marshmallow Men that we get later on in the film. I'm not going to give away what they do in the film, but when we get those mini Stay Puft Marshmallow Men, I literally was in the cinema like, this is fantastic. This is fantastic. Because even so, I see them in the trailers. It was such a great moment when you get these little Stay Puft Marshmallow Men in the film. It's such a great moment. And it literally had me with the biggest smile on my face. And just hearing the Ghostbusters sign on the car again is fantastic. and seeing the original cast brings the biggest smile on your face, and it's such a wonderful film. All the new cast does a great job as well, and it is funny, it is such a delightful film, and it's emotional, and the emotion works. Honestly, it's just such an entertaining, nostalgic-filled, popcorn feast of a movie, and just all in the best way possible. Honestly, this is a proper popcorn flick, that's what they call it, a proper popcorn flick, and not in a bad way. I enjoyed it so much, and I can't wait to go back and rewatch it again, because it felt like Ghostbusters 3 and in the best way possible. And that's kind of what I liked with Ghostbusters Afterlife overall. And so, all in all, I'm going to say that Ghostbusters Afterlife, I'm going to say that it's an 8 out of 10 from me. Anyway guys, what do you think of Ghostbusters Afterlife? Please do comment down below and know your thoughts in the comment section below. Anyway guys, thank you as always for watching, and if you haven't yet, please do click down below and like, subscribe on this video, and look forward to many more both film and TV reviews coming very soon on this channel. See you guys again soon, but bye for now, bye!